Welcome to the Ambition Project Show. I'm your host, Deirdre Sanborn. On this show, I interview ambitious leaders who share the stories, tips, and strategies about what's worked for them so that you, the listener, can achieve greater success at work, with your teams, in your communities, and in life. Today, I have Russ Riddle with us, and he is a patent lawyer. Or actually, correct me, Russ, you're not a patent lawyer, you're an intellectual property lawyer. Is that correct?
Correct. Patent is kind of a discipline all into itself. It is a form of intellectual property, but I do most of my work in the area of copyright and trademark and licensing, but not patents.
And you have some very colorful clients, which have include Barney and Friends, Bob the Builder, and Thomas the Tank Engine. And for those of you who don't know these characters, they're all childhood characters. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, they were programming primarily on PBS that was geared toward children. And Barney the Purple Dinosaur, Bob the Builder, and Thomas the Tank Engine were the three most popular ones that you named. We also did Angelina Ballerina characters, and we introduced the Wiggles in North America. They were, of course, very popular in Australia and other countries, but we brought them into North America, got them broadcast on the Disney Channel, and then VeggieTales, which was huge in the faith-based market, but they had not yet tapped the mass market, Target, Walmart, and places like that. And we had inroads to those retailers, so we took them to mass market.
Wow, so you've covered a complete cast of very strange child characters. I remember my kids when they were young watching The Wiggles, and I was like, what's that all about? So I imagine as a lawyer working with the likes of The Wiggles and Bob the Builder and the Big Pink Dinosaur, that must have been interesting for you. Is there any interesting stories you could tell us, the listeners, about those experiences?
Oh, it was always fun. Of course, we felt good that we were adding to the wholesome programming for children and families. Some of the fun that occurred internally had to do with the creatives, which were on the set, doing the video and taping and all of that, and songs. And then there were us suits, as they called us, at corporate, and that, of course, was the legal team, the finance team, and all of those things. And it was funny because it seemed like the suits and the creatives couldn't always communicate well. We each had our own lingo. Although I had been a recording studio owner and had written some songs and so forth in my past before I went to law school, so I tended to relate to them well.
Interesting. Well, I have to say, Russ, in knowing you, that I would say you're the opposite of a suit. You're fun, you're funny, and I don't typically think of lawyers as being fun and funny. You've also written a book called Persuasive versus Abrasive, The Judges Have Ruled. And I think your big thing is not only about being personable and reaching across the table and being able to communicate better with others, but you teach people the lost art of persuasion. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, in part of my work, I have taught presentation skills training, both public courses and in-house at corporations. And there was a judge who attended one of the public courses and said, Russ, I wish you could teach lawyers to do these things. I asked, what do you mean? He said, well, the lawyers in my courtroom don't present very well. They don't communicate well. They don't tell stories. They've seemed to have lost the art of persuasion. They bicker, they yell, they do all kinds of things that don't help. And so they really do need some training. So what I did was I took that to heart, and I had witnessed some of that, but I went and spent 9 months researching and interviewing state district judges all over the state of Texas. And to a judge, they said, he's right. It's not going so well. And you would think that lawyers, just by the nature of what they do, would be some of the best at the art of persuasion. But it's not true. And we come by that very naturally. And other professions, quite honestly, the same thing happens. Here's what happens when we're in law school. We're taught to think linearly, get all the facts in. It's all about data dump on the bar exam. We're taught to think and act that way. So we pass the bar. Not everyone does, not first time anyway, but we get past the bar and we forget that, okay, there was that skill set to conquer the bar, to graduate law school and conquer the bar, but it's a different skill set to persuasively communicate with people.
Do you think that the career has changed over time? Because when I think of a lawyer having to argue a case, I really think that persuasion would be a big piece of that. So what's changed?
Yeah, I think that it's changed. The main part has changed because of that university training. And I'm not bashing universities, but they have a goal in mind to get you out of school, to get you past the bar exam or the licensure, whatever discipline you're in. And they're good at that. But what happens is before we go to law school or other professional schools, we are very good at storytelling. I mean, from infancy to undergrad, we're good at story. We're good at persuasion. But we forget about that as we're going through the grueling curriculum of law school. And we have to remember and be purposeful about layering back in those things that we once did very well. But if we're not purposeful about it, we don't do that. And so we start not being persuasive, but being abrasive, because we're not using the time-honored art of persuasion any longer. We are doing such things as, oh, if I'm louder than the other lawyer, I win. Or if I get the last word in, I win.
So what I hear you saying, though, Russ, is that a key component of negotiation or persuasion is the art of storytelling.
Right.
And that a lot of lawyers are actually natural storytellers. And in life, I think a lot of people like to hear story and tell stories. So tell us a little bit more about how storytelling weaves into the art of persuasion.
Okay, well, let me back up just a second and review what the art of persuasion is.
Yes.
Back to the day of Aristotle and his art of rhetoric, he talked about the three parts of a conversation that go on in every conversation, whether you're in a courtroom or selling something, trying to close a deal, whatever it is. And there are these three things. There's ethos, pathos, and logos. And the ethos is about the person speaking. Does that person have character? And is that coming across in what they're saying? And then the pathos is about the listener. And that is, are we aware, we the speaker, aware of and sensitized to and tapping into the needs and emotions of the listener? And then the third part is logos, which is facts and reason. What happens, though, is if we're not thinking, we're not applying that art, we go straight to logos. We want to spout everything we know. Here's what we have to eat. How many do you want? And it just creates a barrier between the two people because they don't know who you are. They don't know if you care about them or not. There's an old quote that traces back even to Teddy Roosevelt that said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so it really does have to come in that order, or you're not going to be persuasive. And so translate that into a story of any kind. They have to, through your storytelling, they have to understand a little bit about you. Not necessarily you're telling them things about you, but they glean that from what is coming out of your mouth. And of course, story captivates, and there's a story arc, a natural thing that happens. You have a character, and you learn a little bit about that character, and then bad things happen, and you get down and you try to rise above that and conquer that, and that's a storyline. And that has to happen for people to be able to follow and retain what you're trying to get them to retain.
So if you're not given a lot of time, let's say,
right,
how do you layer in story? And not only that, you said the listener has to feel like you actually care about them. So how is telling the story about you relate to the other person? How does that draw people in? And how do you do it in a short period of time?
Well, when you're telling a story, a personal story is a very effective thing because they learn a little bit about you from the details of that story, how you're telling it, how you're presenting it, and the content. In a courtroom or in any other situation where you don't have a lot of time, you need to have thought about this in advance. One judge put it this way, and it's so true that if you need to be able to summarize your entire case in 30 words or less without adjectives and adverbs. If you can't do that, then you don't really know your case. And you need to be able to have a theme in your case, and that theme can be boiled down to one sentence. And all the better if it rhymes. I mean, think about the phrase from the O.J. Simpson trial that was over 20 years ago. I bet you can tell me what that phrase is.
If you can't, wait, if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. Was that it?
That was pretty close. That's a big part of it.
What was that, 20 years ago?
Yeah.
Oh
the entire theme was, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. And it was that simple. I read a book written by Johnny Cochran, actually talked with Johnny Cochran before he passed away. And he said that was the magic. It wasn't just about the glove not fitting, but about each piece of evidence that the prosecutors were bringing not quite fitting. And if
wow, that's something right there.
And, that trial was months long, but he could boil it down to that simple phrase. And that's what we have to be able to do if we're going to, A, be an effective storyteller, but B, come about it in a persuasive fashion.
Do you have any tools or tips, tricks, or steps that somebody could use who's fresh to the art of persuasion that they can use as a guideline to being more persuasive? Yeah.
And let me just cover off on that one. What I call that principle is a good story gets the glory. Judge after judge told me. Judges said, look, almost always the lawyer who more effectively tells a story wins the verdict. You'd think, it depends on who has the good facts or who has the law on their side, and those things matter. But if you can tell an effective story, you're going to get the glory and win the verdict.
So it doesn't have to do with the facts as much as it does about the story? Is that what you're saying?
In a lot of times, that's the case. I mean, we're not making, when I say story now, we're not making things up.
Okay.
We are just telling the narrative of what happened in story form, as opposed to throwing everything on the wall. What came out in my research was the number one thing that causes jurors to not like certain lawyers is that when those lawyers waste time. They beat dead horses. They throw everything on the wall, no matter how relevant, to hope something sticks. And that takes time. And when you're beating dead horses and going at it, 5 ways from all angles, the jury, what do you think? We're stupid? We get it. Move on. And so what happens, we fall into that wasting time when we haven't thought about our story, our theme, and boiling it down to 30 words or less. And that helps us organize ourselves, and we get it across in a much more concise and memorable way. And so this good story gets the glory.
So preparation is a big part of that.
Exactly. Another piece that I like to talk about is this, and I'm talking to me as much as anyone, but it's this principle. You are not all that. Just chat. Yeah.
You are not all that, just chat.
Yeah, we get so full of ourselves. And it turns out juries don't like to be talked down to.
Okay.
No one does. And the best lawyers, Clarence Darrow, Jerry Spence, all the ones through the years that have done so well, they had this horizontal dialogue with the jury. They were just chatting with the jury. But what we do is we get so full of ourselves and we start using our trade legalese and all these big, arrogant words. And they're not working. They may not know what they mean. We have all these phrases in the law that lawyers know what they mean, like attractive nuisance. That's a doctrine in the law. Well, to someone that's not in the law, they may think that's Kim Kardashian, an attractive nuisance. But it's really not. But we got to get away from our lingo and our jargon and quit using these, $10 words when a 10-cent word will do.
Keep
One
it
judge said, "I
simple,
think
silly,
lawyers,
right? Keep
yeah,
it simple,
lawyers
silly.
lawyers are proud of themselves when they use a big word. It gets ridiculous." So that's one error that we make. We use these highfalutin words. Another thing we fall into is giving an air that we're the smartest person in the room. And I will tell you some ways that happens. But we're probably not the most intelligent person in the room. We might be, but it doesn't matter, because if we focus on that, we're not going to be persuasive. One of the things that happens is all the theatrics. This jerking the glasses off and doing all this stuff with them, and all this is going on. It happens. It's silly, and people are going, "What are you doing? Why are you doing that?"
Right.
Or these cocky walks. It's kind of like the old Carly Simon song, "You're So Vain." You walked into the party like you were walking onto a yacht. Or how about the Saturday Night Fever song, "You can tell by the way I use my walk, I'm a woman's man, no time to talk." Lawyers strutting around, it's like, what are you doing? And then the tone, the condescending tone, that gets me in trouble at home. When we're talking face to face with people, and emotions are involved and attitudes are involved, there's a study that when that's kind of going on, 7% of the message is the words, 38% is tone, and 55% body language. But if you cop tone, they don't hear what you're saying. You're like the teacher on Charlie Brown, because they don't get past the tone. My wife tells me, and you could probably beat me to the punch on this one, Deirdre, she'll get mad. I'll say, "Honey, all I said was," and she stops me mid-sentence. "Oh, it's not what you said. It's how you said it." And so we get into these things, and we end up just losing sight of we're trying to be persuading someone of something. And we're just defeating ourselves. We're not being persuasive. We're being abrasive.
So what I hear you saying is it's really about relatability.
Exactly.
Where did we get the misperception, at least in the legal field, that strutting your stuff or seeming very important or pounding your fist on the table is the way to persuade somebody?
Well, it comes again in the training, because we have what's called the Socratic method, where the law professor takes you on, and it becomes a battle of sorts. But also Hollywood plays into this.
I think you're right there.
It's good Hollywood storyline to show lawyer behaving badly. I watched Boston Legal, loved Boston Legal, but the antics of Denny Crane and his partner, Alan Shore. I had one judge even bring that up when I was interviewing him. He says, 10 to 20% of the lawyers that walk into my courtroom think they're Denny Crane. It's ridiculous when you could see that just reeking and exuding from someone. They're off on the wrong foot. But you've got all kinds of lawyer shows where I yell at the TV, "Well, they can't do that. That's stupid."
Well, let's look at the average person. I mean, take it away from the lawyer persuading the jurors in a court and just look at the average Joe. And I would say that more times than not in our modern day society, it's really about he who is loudest wins, or at least that's the belief, right? So
yeah. It's a misperception. It's a myth. It's really about the more likable you are, the more people, let's just think about it. Who do we do business with? Who do we want to deal with, buy things from, trade with one another over? It's the people we like. Yes. Everything is about relationships. And when we lose sight of that, we're not going to be terribly persuasive. We've got to foster that relationship. I like you, so I am doing this show with you. If I didn't like you, it'd be easy just to say no.
Right.
And that likability comes across and comes about in many ways. One is how you go about the art of persuasion. You need to know a little bit about me to know if you're going to trust me.
Right.
Then you know that I care about you and what's best for you before you're going to want to buy anything from me. And what happens is new salespeople, they get that out of whack because they want to go right to, here's my product, here's the features, it's only this much, how many do you want? And the person's backing up, going, get it out of my face. I don't know you, and you don't know me, and I don't know if you even know what I need. You
Right.
might not need that. And so we repel people that way. And then also it's just, the likability traits. I mean, who do you like as people, as friends? It's the ones that smile. They treat you as an equal. They don't talk down to you. They
Yeah.
don't try to outshout you they always have to have the last word. I mean, those people are annoying. We avoid them. And so that's true in any situation. It's true when you're trying to find a spouse. It's true when you're trying to convince your children. It's true when you're trying to sell something. It's true in the courtroom. It's true anywhere.
So I think part of the problem, though, is that we get wrapped up in believing that you have to do certain things or be certain things to be likable. So we talked about preparation. Well, when you're in life, like, how do you prepare yourself for a conversation with somebody? You talk about story. Well, your story is your own story. So how do you tell that story, or your relatability? Like, we've kind of lost sight of how do we just be more ourselves. Do you have any suggestions or insight into that?
Well, yeah, I think you just need to be yourself and try not to emulate someone else. To that judge's point, lawyers acting like Denny Crane. They're not Denny Crane. Denny Crane's not even real. It's William Shatner's character on a show. You really just, who am I? And I don't mean to keep taking it back to the legal side, but I would give you an example. Racehorse Haynes is a famous lawyer here in Texas, Richard Racehorse Haynes. He's still alive. He's down in Houston. But he told this story one time. I was hearing him present, and he said when he was new, young attorney, Clarence Darrow was still around and trying cases, and Clarence Darrow would sometimes, right in the middle of his story or his argument, he'd just reach down and pick up a baby and kiss the baby and carry it around the courtroom and then hand the baby back to mama, and wow, what a great guy, that's so cool. And Racehorse Haynes said, I tried it, and guess what, the first kid I picked up had some sort of peanut butter and jelly thing, and it got all over my face and it backfired. I looked stupid. He said, be yourself. But we try to emulate others who are successful, and we can learn lessons from studying why they're successful and trying to be them. Juries, prospects that we're trying to sell to, anyone can smell an inauthentic fake a mile away, and so we're just defeating ourselves when we do that. And in terms of the stories that you asked, a couple of things there. The same story might not be the best story for different audiences.
Okay.
If you're talking to a person from the country, a rural type person, talking about the city traffic or the yacht that you just took a ride on, or all of that person's. It's not that they can't understand it. It's just they don't relate to it. That's not where they are. That's not their life. Same thing if you're in an urban situation, you start trying,
Well, again, it comes back to relatability, right? Like,
yeah,
if you don't want to be, if you're, a three-piece suit wearing guy and you're hanging out with a bunch of construction workers, you become less relatable than
right.
if you just come to their level. But that doesn't mean being inauthentic. It just means finding that place of commonality.
Right. It's a two step thing, I think. Being yourself is one thing, but choosing your stories, choosing the anecdotes or the metaphors or what you're going to try to be persuasive with, it has to be something that they can relate to. If you just try to use the same story for every audience or every prospect, you're going to strike out because not everyone is the same. Not everyone's had the same experiences. You have to be relatable, and your content has to be relatable.
Are there any other steps that you would share with us to help me and the listeners understand how to be a better or more persuasive orator, or just individual or salesperson or friend? What's your suggestions there?
Well, there's another one, and it kind of ties to some of the stuff I've said, but it's can the conniption extend grace, mercy, and redemption. Okay?
Wait, repeat that one more time.
Can the conniption
Can the conniption
extend grace, mercy, and redemption? Conniption is an old term, maybe archaic even. My grandparents used to pitching a fit. Oh, he had a conniption. Means he was pitching a fit.
Okay, yeah.
If we don't get our way, or if the other person just doesn't immediately become persuaded, we tend to get upset. We tend to start getting our dander up, and we start misbehaving. We're defeating ourselves again because we're not becoming more likable. We're becoming more dislikable. No one wants to deal with someone that can't take no, or is a sore loser, or starts misbehaving because they're not getting their way. We see that on the playground all the time, kids doing that. But you know what? Adults are just kids with wrinkles and responsibilities, and we act just like the kids on the playground sometimes. And what we got to do is can that. But
wait a second. What if you're just being yourself by being belligerent? I guess there's lacks relatability, right?
You've got yourself a big problem if that is you. If you're that way all the time, my goodness, we've got to start at base one with that person. In grace, mercy, and redemption, a lot of people think those are just terms of faith, and they are, but they're really terms of relationship. We're all going to mess up. We all do mess up. And if you're going to have a good relationship, you need to treat that person with grace. You don't have to agree. You don't have to condone, but be gracious and treat them with grace, because that preserves dignity, both of your dignity. Mercy. Everyone needs to be forgiven now and then. And if we can't just say, well, one strike, you're out. No, give them at least 3 strikes. In redemption, give them an opportunity to redeem themselves. These are just good terms for relationships, and stop pitching a fit. The other one I would tell you is when folks have fun, things get done. And by that I mean, we need to be optimistic. We need to have a sense of humor. And it doesn't mean we have to be a stand-up comedian. Those things are hard. But you can see the funny in things. Funny's all around. And particularly if you see the funny in yourself. What's humorous about you and what you just did or what you just said, that is endearing. And when folks are having fun, more gets done. There's a myth that if you're just having fun, it'll just be a slippery slope and nobody will get anything done. No, it's quite the opposite, is what research has shown. So have some fun. Be yourself. Work on the relationship. Try to be likable. All these things are just common sense. And so you'd scratch your head and go, well, duh. Well, the problem with duh is we're not doing it. We have to be intentional. And that's what I said earlier on. This is not rocket science. These are not things that are foreign to us. We've heard them before. But because of our training, because of the stress that we're under, a lot of things, we forget. And we just got to be purposeful in layering those back in.
Grace, mercy, redemption, and have fun. How does that apply in the courtroom? Does it translate?
I think it does. For instance, some lawyers, they think, boy, if I just attack this witness and catch them in a lie, then I'm going to win. It almost always backfires. Now, you can bring it out, but you don't have to be a real jerk. Choice of words, approach. For instance, the jury can tell that someone's lying just like you can. But it's one thing to say, "Are you lying? Or you're just lying about that, aren't you?" Or, now, could it be that you're mistaken? Could it be that that's not what happened? What really happened was, you see the difference in those two approaches. You're still getting to the same finding that was not the truth. But you can go about it in a way where you don't lose dignity. You don't belittle them. because that's going to backfire on you. Do it graciously. You still make the point, but you do it graciously as opposed to just sledgehammering them on the head.
Any tips about, let's say we all, our egos get in the way and emotions get in the way, and, if we're not getting our way, we get in the way of ourselves. Like, any suggestions on how to remind ourselves that it's about relatability and dialing it back? Or because so many of us get caught up in really wanting to be very persuasive and get our way.
Sometimes you have to remember that, in court is one thing because, time is ticking and all of that. But in relationships in general, sometimes you have to remember that a few things. There's a wrong way to be right. Okay? And you may be right, but do some permanent damage to the relationship. So back off. You don't have to win every debate. Pick and choose your battles, because you can win the battle or lose the war. In other words, you can do such damage to the relationship that, okay, you proved you were right. My bad. You're right. But I don't want to have a relationship with you anymore because you've personally attacked me. So we have to remember, and sometimes it just calls for a timeout.
Yep.
Sometimes we just, okay, we're not going to agree today. Let's come back to this another day, maybe another setting. And 9 times out of 10, that works. Or sometimes it's just shut up and let them have their say. That's why mediation and those kinds of things work so well. Because a lot of times, people just need to vent. And once they've vented, they're okay. But if you don't ever give them that chance, you just want to be the one doing all the talking. You never get there. And if they never get past that, then as a relationship, the two of you are not going to get past it. So, take a breath, step back. It really relates to a lot of what Mama and Daddy probably told you. Count to 10 or whatever. Maybe you need to just sleep on it.
So give it some space, take a time out. Those are actually elements of persuasion, is what
Absolutely.
I would say.
Yeah, because if you step back and you go, you realize, okay, if I'd have kept going, I would have done damage to my credibility, and I wouldn't have won whatever it is, the deal or whatever it is. You have to step back and come at it from another way sometimes. And what happens is we don't. That it has to be a very intentional, purposeful, thoughtful thing to do that, because otherwise, instinctively, we just start shouting and getting louder and louder and louder, and it escalates, and that's going nowhere but bad.
How did you learn all these things, Russ? Did you learn by mistake, trial and error, pun intended? Or are you just a naturally amicable kind of guy?
Well, I try to be naturally amicable, but I'm a human being, and I guess the older I get, the more mellow I'm getting, the more hopefully wiser I'm getting. But yeah, I've got scars on my knees, Deirdre. I've skinned my knees time and time again. If I could go back and do over, I would do a lot of things differently. And so I've learned some of these things personally. The older I get, I seem to be more observant of others, and so I've watched others do this. But life is all about experiences, good and bad, and the main thing is to grow from the bad experiences or where you've messed up, and hopefully I've done that. I've certainly tried to be a student of it. I believe in lifelong learning, and I'm getting better all the time. I haven't arrived. I'll probably never arrive because there's no perfection in us. But if we keep getting better, keep working on the art and the craft of persuasion, keep working on our own authenticity, being genuine and sincere, working on those likability factors is just really, what do you like in others? Well, guess what? They like those same things in you, so you need to demonstrate them. It's really, again, none of this is just earth-shaking new news.
No.
It's things we know. It's just
we put boxes around it or containers of our put our lingo around it, but what it really boils down to is it's really pretty basic stuff. And as the Ambition Project Show listeners are all about natural learners or wanting to learn how to do things better and feel more fulfilled in what they're doing, but we try to find the secret sauce or the art of this or the science of that. And I think a lot of it just comes back to basic human goodness on some level.
I think so, and I think realizing that we're learning until the day we die.
Yep.
It's not that you're never satisfied, but you never quit learning.
How do you can never quit learning, though? Have you surrounded yourself with people who have been mentors to you, or do you actively go out and seek resources or avenues to help you learn more? How do you approach it?
All of the above. I try to surround myself with people that are smarter than me, or maybe they know areas that I don't know. I mean,
so give me an example of that, like a mentor that you've had or maybe someone who's been influential in your life that gave you that big aha moment.
Well, in so many areas of my life, I've done that. For instance, I'm an active member in the National Speakers Association, and
in fact, you're the past president, right, Russ?
Immediate past president of the North Texas chapter, and there's something magical about if you want to be better, surrounding yourselves with people that are better than you or have been there longer than you. They really know a few things that you can learn, and let's face it, there's always someone who knows something you don't. And just being around those people in the National Speakers Association, for instance, has taught me so many things about the speaking industry and the business of speaking, training, consulting, coaching, things. Some of it I already knew. Some of it I'd never thought of. And it's not to say, again, you got to be authentic. You've got to use what works for you, and not everything is for everybody. I like it, but it's like eating fish. You just spit out the bones. You take what's good and what works for you, and then you just disregard the rest. Doesn't mean it's wrong, just means it's not right for you. So I think in all areas of life we do that. When you have a board of directors, you want key pieces that you don't know so much about. You want experts in those areas. Same thing when you're building a business. You're hiring people. You want to hire people. Like, I'm not a numbers guy. I can do simple arithmetic, but I don't thrive on numbers. I knew that early on. So I need someone that's very good at that, because that's not my strength. And so you just want, like, all of these things, Deirdre, we just have to be thinking about it, be purposeful about it. And just always seeking to learn. I do it by books. I do it by audio things. I go hear speakers. I surround myself with smart folks. I do everything I can to learn, because, we used to think that as we age, the brain just starts depleting and all of that. And the more recent neuroscience shows that, no, the brain, we never really tap into everything it could be. I mean, the human brain has more RAM than we can ever deplete. But we must try, because the more we know, the more relevant and effective we become. And that's kind of how I feel about ambition. Keep it on, because you're never going to solve everything. But the more you know, the more effective you can be, the more creative you can be, and certainly the more relevant you can be.
And that's exactly why I created this show, the Ambition Project Show, is so that we can bring experts and guests on like you, Russ, who could share with us what you've learned, and so that we can also embody that and share that with others. So it's just a one big infinity loop, if you will, of learning and opportunity. And the more we learn, hopefully we can model that and share that with others as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're all on the same revolving planet, flying through space at however fast it's flying. We're all in this together. So we can learn from one another, and we need to embrace that as opposed to resist it. It's just like change. Some people are resistant to change. Well, guess what? Everything's always changing, and you can latch onto it, and you can leverage it, or you can resist it. But it's going to happen whether you like it or not. And we just got to be purposeful, help each other out.
Well, as a parting note, first of all, I'd like to say this has been really fun and useful, and you're very relatable, Russ.
Well, thanks. You hit on something early on where you said that I didn't seem like the typical lawyer, and I know what you meant. You meant the stereotype that we all have of the lawyer, because there's wonderful lawyers in this town, in this state, all over. There's good people, but there's also people that perpetuate the stereotype because they are that. I used to go to networking events, and people would say these kinds of things to me and say, Russ, you just don't come across as a lawyer. And I almost kiss them over it because I know what they're saying. You're not that old nasty stereotype. One lady one day said, you're really an anomaly. And a light bulb went off in my head, and I said, attorney at law, anomaly at law. So I've been using the moniker or the brand Anomaly at Law for several years now because it just fits, and people seem to relate to it. And I always get a chuckle out of that. So
that is so perfect for you. Perfect.
Yeah.
So before we part, do you have any products, services, or resources that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Sure. You can go to russriddle.com and go into the store part. I've written 2 books and a manual. One book is Lawyer Up the Smart Way, and then it's a short read. How that came about was I was having people ask me all the time, well, Russ, I need a such and such lawyer. That's not your area that you practice, but I want a person like you. How do I find that? So it's just some tips of how to find the right lawyer for you. How to make sure they're competent and it's a good fit and all of those things. Lawyer Up the Smart Way. Another thing that I've done, in fact, I've got a copy here so I can show you. I wrote it's a 100-page mini book about persuasive versus abrasive.
That is mini.
Yeah. It's a lot in it. It's 9 months of research.
Excellent. It's like your pocket guide to being persuasive.
Yeah, and I do have a sweet spot in my law practice in terms of trademark, copyright, licensing. So I have a manual called Corral Your Cash Cow. Your cash cow is your intellectual property. Any business or company knows that that's what really everything's about. It is your cash cow. It might be a purple dinosaur.
Would you call that your brand in a way? Your personal brand?
It's not a brand, but it's very much authentic to me. I'm a native Texan. I've never lived outside of the state of Texas. I was born and raised in Cowtown. Even though I don't wear a cowboy hat and ride a horse all the time, I do work cattle on a ranch with a friend, and I'm just very much into that persona. So Corral Your Cash Cow is very apropos to who I am.
Excellent. Well, sounds great. So that's at russriddle.com, and go to the store and you can find where those resources and books are.
And I tell you what, the first 10 people that email me and would like a copy of that mini book, Persuasive versus Abrasive, which touches on a lot of what we've talked about today, I'll give that to the first 10 people free. If they email me at Russ, it's Russ, R-U-S-S, at anomalyatlaw.com.
Russ at anomalyatlaw.com. This has been a great interview. Thanks, Russ. And you can find Russ's links to Persuasive versus Abrasive and everything else we've been chatting about here on this episode by going to theambitionprojectshow.com. And that's our dose of today's wisdom. So thanks again, Russ. And
my pleasure.
We look forward to continuing the conversation.
Me too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.